don't see Jeff here yet, so I'm just going to kick it off. So Zach, welcome to Coaching Agile Journeys. We're so excited to have you here. I am also really passionate about Agile in HR and Agile hiring and all those kind of things. So I'm so glad that I have a talk on it too coming up, and I can't wait to hear your angle on it. It's such a huge opportunity to engage other pieces of the puzzle here all together. So thank you for joining us. And in case you didn't know, so the co-hosts, wave your hands. We're here, your co-hosts, almost 4 years strong now at Coaching Agile Journeys, and we've grown this amazing community. So if you're joining us for the first time, we'd love to hear it. And we run this event on our own time and money. All of our events are queued up on our website. So if you have anything awesome to say about us, and if we've made a difference to you, we'd really love to hear that from you. And if you feel super inspired, you can donate on our website as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Zach. Thanks so much, Zach, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the invite to be here. It's exciting to participate and to be part of this community with you all this morning and evening, wherever you are in the world. So again, thank you. Really means a lot to be invited. All right. So the topic, as we introduced, right, we're talking about hiring. We're talking about onboarding. We're talking about this practice and this process of bringing people into our organizations and our groups and our teams. And I'm going to be talking a lot about what I call the convention of hiring. So why don't I get ourselves started here by sharing here. So the convention of hiring, right? The idea of bringing people into our organizations, the way that we go about doing it. I don't know what your thoughts are and your perspectives are on this topic, but when I think about what it's like to hire people, what it's like to be a job seeker looking for work, it really feels to me like a blur. It's dark, it's gray, it feels impersonal. Sometimes it's hard to get feedback. It's hard to connect to people. You're maybe using job portals, or you're relying on other people to find candidates for you. It's just a big blur. And this has been unchanged, I think, in our companies, in the way that we hire for years, right? For a long time. But yet, I think everybody on this community especially would agree that our organizations are transforming at a rate that is probably unprecedented in modern business world. Right? We're looking at people in different ways. We're looking at structures in different ways and processes and the type of work environment and conditions that we give to people at work. We're looking at it in different ways. And yet the way that we bring people into our businesses, these modern businesses, feels like it's, well, still stuck, right? So the convention of hiring, if I asked you what it costs US businesses, the impact of the way that we hire as an expense, how much would you say it costs companies? A couple $100 million in lost, revenue, like expense, 500 million?
You mean for a bad hire?
Just our hiring practices and the outcome of the way that we hire.
Gotcha.
What is how much does it cost? Anyone have a guess? The most recent data that I have available is 2018. So in 2018, how much money did companies, and we'll just say it this way, did companies lose in the United States due to their hiring practices?
$1 billion.
$1 billion? Yeah, that's a lot of money, right? $1 billion? That's crazy. Why would it be so high? It was $1 trillion.
$1 trillion. Wow. Oh, wow.
Oh my God.
$1 trillion in hiring expense that US businesses occurred in 2018. The convention of hiring and this feeling of this blur and this impersonal way of hiring, this resume-driven hiring, this screen, $1 trillion. How could it cost that much? Because the annualized turnover rate in 2018 for US businesses was 26.3%, 1 in 4 people. If you have a company of 100 people, be prepared to lose 25 of them and need to replace them this year. That's a lot. Worse, when researchers asked people at companies how they felt about their hiring practices, only 12% said that they were effective. The way that we hire, the way that we bring people on, I approve of the way that our company goes about onboarding and hiring. Just about 12%. So this is a huge opportunity, right? This is a huge piece of the puzzle that we could, or a huge problem that is, is there to be solved, right? I'm seeing more. I should probably check the chat here. All right, just making sure that, all right, cool. So when I see the chat pop up, should I monitor it or?
No, we'll monitor the chat for you. Yep.
Cool, thank you so much. All right, awesome. So maybe this surprises you. To me, it doesn't surprise me at all, right? Because when I think about the convention of hiring, I think about expertism. I think about we go out there and we look for the best people out there. I want the person with the acronyms after their names, and I want to hear in their resume how they just were slaying all the dragons and they were the hero, and that they worked at the big companies, that they were the ones that created all this positive change. There's no place for beginners in the convention of hiring. There's no place for people learning. There's no place for people curious. We want the 10X developer. Right? Not these sensitive hearts that want to pair program and mob program, be together with community and these empathetic leaders. We want the hardline production, productivity, expert driven people. And once we get them, we say, cool, we got you. You signed on the dotted line, and then we're going to bring in the company, and we just want you to get going as fast as possible. And we think about, what do they need? They need a computer, probably need some of their benefit information, where they're going to sit, and we just make sure that it's tolerable enough that they could get to work. So today I want to have a conversation with you about a different way of thinking about this puzzle. I want you to think about this idea of hiring and onboarding as this first impression that we make with our organizations that can be truly the catalyst for, when people say agile transformation and you hear about how they're training practices and things like that. I want to make a case today for why this might be the catalyst that you need to really, truly transform your organization. Have you ever heard of that saying, people are our greatest asset? Yeah, I think that's a bunch of bull, right? Because if just people were our greatest asset, we could go and hire the 10X, developer, the big expert. But when you put a bunch of experts together, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to go well. What I want to argue for today is that your greatest asset is the relationships between people, not just people themselves. And I want to bring to you a set of principles that we can use to find ways to connect to people better when we're making this first impression of hiring and onboarding. So that when we do find the right people and they come into our organizations, they're inspired, they feel like they're supported, they feel like they're connected, they can believe in themselves, and they can be their best. So as was mentioned, my name is Zach. I live out in San Diego, so I'm talking to you right now from beautifully rainy, one of the few days every winter we get when it rains, rainy San Diego. My career has really been in organizational change and software development, almost always from the lens of Agile. I love to contribute to the Agile community in any way that I can. That's why I'm here today sharing some of these ideas with you. And this talk again is going to focus very much around principles. I'm going to give you some examples of actual practices, of course, but I want to start with this idea of giving you principles that you can use to think about this convention of hiring in a different way, and use these principles to experiment in your own organizations, in your own teams, and really, wherever you're working to create new outcomes with, the relationships you build in your organization and, the way that people work together. So if you've ever heard if you've ever been at a conference and such and heard me speak, you know that I love storytelling. So before we get into, again, more conversation together, let me set the stage with a story. This is a story of a woman by the name of Annie. And Annie went to school at the University of Illinois. So if there's anybody out there that was an Illini out there, then Annie was part of your tribe. But after graduation, Annie went into Chicago and started working. Right? She found a job at a company, worked there for about 5 years. She did great, right? She got a couple promotions, really enjoyed her work, was happy. And during that period of time, even met somebody very special to her. And as time went on, she found herself engaged. Right? So Annie was really enjoying her life, and she was in a good place. Right around that time, her fiance got a job offer in the Bay Area. And it was his dream job. It was everything that he had ever wanted. It was literally the work that he was passionate about. And so of course, Annie wanted to support him. So she left her job, went with him on a plane. They flew out to the Bay Area, and they started a new life. And then Annie found herself back in an unfamiliar place in the convention of hiring, where she was spending a lot of time on job portals, talking to recruiters, working on her resume, getting resume tips and advice, and going through this really tedious process of applying and hearing nothing, having an interview and getting no feedback. And I think we've all been there, right? We've experienced this. So after a few months of, without success and feeling very frustrated, Annie was at a meetup group just trying to make some friends when she met a really cool woman there. And the woman said, "Annie, I think you're great. You need to apply at my company. We could really use someone like you." Which is great. So, she put in her information, and when the HR contacted her, they didn't offer her an interview. They sent her an invitation, and the invitation simply said, "This is a chance to meet Annie." She said, "That's different." So she showed up, for her her meeting to get to know everybody. And there was a greeter there at the front of the office. And she's like, "Annie, this is so great. I'm so happy to see you. This is wonderful that you're here. Hey, before we get started though, there's a coffee shop right across the street. Why don't we go have coffee? And let's just chat for a little bit." So they did. We sat down and talked a bit. Annie felt her fear just wash away, her anxiety start to slowly fade. And she started to get to know the people that she was going to be working with or talking with. And after that introduction, that little warm up, they went into the interview, and they didn't go into a conference room and have a big panel interview. No, they walked from room to room. They walked around the office, and they talked solely about values and principles. They talked about what the company stand for and what Annie was looking for in work and what made her happy. And the whole conversation was focused around her and her ability to connect to the business mission. At the end, they gave Annie a form. And on the form, there was a couple bits of feedback that the folks wanted to know from Annie. And at the bottom, there was a box that said, "Are you still interested? Do you want to proceed? Yes or no?" She's like, "This is unbelievable. This is so different." She checked yes. She was really interested. And they contacted her and said, "Cool, the next time that we get together, we're going to have an opportunity to learn from you. Please, you'll have an hour. Teach us anything that you want. Use whatever method you want to teach us with. And we look forward to seeing you again." Now, Annie knew that she was being tested, right? She knew that these were skills that she was going to use in this job. But when she came together, when she prepared and was able to then give this training in this workshop, it felt like real work. And she appreciated the fact that, it was more like her ability to demonstrate how she works and how she goes about, solving problems. So she felt more fairly assessed. And if, they stayed in touch with her all the time, they called her and they kept giving her updates and saying, "Annie, this is where we're at. We still have a couple of people to talk with," but so she always felt like she was connected. And then one day her greeter called her and said, "Annie, we've made a decision. There's going to be a package. We've sent it to you, and you'll receive it tomorrow. It'll have everything you need to know. It's going to have our decision. It's going to have the feedback. It's going to have everything that you need. And of course you can call if you want to discuss it further." So the next morning she went to the door, and there was the package. Picked it up and brought it into her dining room where her fiance was there. And she put the box on the table and looked at him and said, "I've never been more nervous and more excited about a job ever." So she opened up the package and looked inside. And that's it. And that's the end of the story. What do you think?
What was in the box?
Yeah, you're like, what happened? Where didn't Annie get hired? Didn't she get hired? But see, the problem is that, and I'm kind of sheepishly ashamed to admit it, but I don't know, because I wrote the story. Yeah, and I know that disappoints people, but the point wasn't to be finding out about Annie. The point of the story was when I was complaining about the convention of hiring to a mentor, she told me that I sounded angry and kind of ranting, and that she asked me, "How do you really want it to be?" And so this is the story that I wrote. I don't write the story because I think that the process that was described is what should happen, but I think this story reflects the sort of principles that I believe that the hiring process should be. Right? So it isn't so much that I think that we should be sending packages to people like Annie, but that feeling of connection and that desire and that feeling that no matter what the decision was, I feel like I've made friends and I've built relationships in my community, and that maybe me as somebody in the job pool, I've been brought up as a result of my interactions with this company. Right? So yeah, it's a fake story, but it's also derived from real stories that I've heard. Right? So I've hosted a learning community in San Diego for years. About, I think, almost 7 years now. And this learning community that I've hosted, it gives me this wonderful access to be able to talk with people and hear their stories. right? So I can interview people for free. It's great. Over the span of 2 years, I talked with people who were looking for work and for people who were hiring. And I went to the people who were, hiring, and I said, what are your goals for hiring? Now, not just, it's obviously to fill a requisition before you lose it and, because we need people, but really when you hire people, what are your goals? And you know what the four most popular things that people told me? So in no order, the 4 goals that were shared with me over 2 years, over 50 people that I talked with. Well, one was just to straight increase resources. Look, I just need more people. I have to increase resources. I need more, output. Okay, fair enough. People also said, there is talent that is absent in my organization and they need these skills. We're going to this type of approach of what I need to increase the availability of this skill pool or this talent pool. Okay. People also said order and cohesion. Usually when talking about hiring a manager type position, I need somebody that's going to bring more order and structure. I need things to be more cohesive and aligned. And of course, people said, we've got goals, right? I need these people to come in and drive the annual goals to hit, we've got goals that have to be achieved and we need people to help with that. The 4 most popular. These are the stories that I hear when people say that they're looking to hire people. So, I asked the same question. I said, hey, so for those that are looking for work, what are your goals for getting hired? And they said the same thing, right? No, they didn't say the same thing. They said entirely different stories. They said things like, well, I really want to grow my career. I want to improve. I want to develop my skills. I want to learn. They said things like, I want to matter. I want to have an impact. I want to be able to contribute. And people also just said, I want to be happy. I love my job. Right? So if I take these stories and I boil them down into a single word, what word best describes each of these phrases? This is what I see. Do you see it too? Look how out of alignment we are. We're so out of alignment. When you as a hiring manager or you as a job seeker sit down at that table to talk, you're not on the same page. Your needs and wants are entirely different. How does that influence, your conversation? It's like, it reminds me of the performance review paradigm, where the manager giving a performance review wants to improve the person, but the person getting the review just wants a bonus or a raise or a promotion, right? We're so out of alignment. So it's no wonder that this convention of hiring struggles to find the right people to really achieve organization goals and turns into an expense of $1 trillion. So I looked to the Agile Manifesto. I said, hopefully the Agile Manifesto can help me understand this, right? And I went to values. I said, well, why don't I look at the first set of the first value statement and figure out what I can leverage from this that exists in the convention of hiring that maybe I can help improve some outcomes. Maybe I can help improve some of these stories that people have. And I looked and I said, well, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And I thought about what are all the ways that we value individuals and interactions? Well, I didn't come up with anything right away. So I said, well, that's fine. We can get to that later. I'll go to processes and tools. And I was thinking, well, we've got all these amazing application tracking software stuff, job portals, keyword. We've got a whole list of processes and tools we value. But where does the convention of hiring value individuals and interactions first? I didn't see it. I said, that's okay. Strike one. Got more to go. There's more values, right? So what about working software doesn't really fit. But if I think about extrapolating what working software is from hiring, I'm really talking about the actual individual applicant, right? Really trying to bring out the best in the applicant and understand the applicant. I couldn't really think of anything, but I could think of places where we value comprehensive documentation, like resume screening. And has anybody ever written a job description and hired to it, with your 35 bullet points that somebody should have and made sure that they hit every, no, right? But we do it and we really value that. Okay, strike two, there's got to be more in the Agile Manifesto, right? Applicant collaboration. So this idea of instead of customer collaboration, if customer is really the applicant, how do we value collaborating with the applicant as much as possible? struggled with it. But when it comes to contract negotiation, I thought about things like management-driven hiring and these contract-like engagements saying, sorry, thank you for applying, but I'm just, here's your automatic generic rejection letter. Or we just go out and set up contracts with recruiters to find people for us, and we allow them to take a cut. It's all highly driven around contract negotiation. I didn't think about where we spent the time trying to really collaborate with the applicant. Well, we've already struck out. There's 3 strikes. So I guess responding to change doesn't really matter versus following a plan, but I couldn't think of anything in responding to change either. But I've worked with a number of organizations that really ensure that the organization has one standardized interview process that they train the whole organization and management across, and that everything has to follow this structure so that everything is fair and the same. And this really frustrated me. So as I was complaining about it again and talking with friends, I had a good friend of mine named Jason Kearney that said, we've done some amazing things at my organization. And you know what the shift was? The huge shift happened for us when we all just came together and said, interviews frankly suck. And the convention of hiring is broken. What I think we need to do is find a way to make sure that we can meet the interviewee's needs. And if we do that, then I think an interview will be better if we attend to them first. That's an interesting approach. And for him, he said the outcome, changed our organization. So I'm going to use this quote right here as the first place that we talk about the 4 principles that I'd like to introduce you to for shifting the convention of hiring. And the first is going to be driven directly from Jason's quote. Principle number 1, simply attend to needs. And I have to pause right here. So when I built this presentation years ago, my daughter at the time was 6. And I remember I showed her this picture and she, oh, yeah. And then for the whole day, I had to keep showing her this picture and over again. She thought it was the most adorable thing. But attend to needs, I think, really is this. Right? It's this idea of understanding that when we bring somebody into an organization, the needs and wants that we have as the company are perfectly fine and valid, just as their needs are. And respecting that when we do come to the interview table, we're in completely different places. So we need to attend to both. And so we have to think about how we're going to do that. In Jason's case, the gentleman who had the quote prior, the way that they decided to structure their interview process is that they said, number 1, the first principle is that we'll need to ensure that the person is a good fit for our company. I think that's fine, right? After all, that's a perfectly valid goal. That's a perfectly valid need. You do need to make sure that it's the right person. But number 2, our interview process needs to ensure that the person feels that the company is the right fit for them. And then he said, well, then we're going to go even deeper. We're going to ensure that there's a 3rd principle in service to the applicant to make sure that they feel fairly assessed. And we're going to make sure that we can check in on that. But that the interview structure that they designed had more emphasis in ensuring that the applicant's needs were attended to rather than the company. And that is a huge shift from what I think is normal in our standard convention of hiring. So principle number 1, attend to needs. Number 2, build up from teams. Agile loves teams, right? And we know that team-centric ways of working can deliver superior results, right? So what does it mean to build up from teams? Let me share a quick story with you. I was once working with a team that, we had a lot of conflict. We had a lot of problems. I should say the folks working together did. So we spent a lot of time to uncover what our values were. We did a lot of conflict resolution and mediation together, and really did some tears and cried out type work, right? Because there was a lot of hurt. And in the end, we got to a place where people were feeling really good and excited. And literally the next day, I got an email from the manager that said, please invite, send these meeting invites to 2 new people. We've hired 2 new engineers who are joining the team on Monday. What? Are you kidding? How could we leave this group of people that was struggling to be a team and working and putting in the effort to be a team out of this conversation? But we did. So the idea of build up from teams is to start with teams and use teams and their wisdom to understand what and how, what we need to hire and how might be the best way to do that. People often ask me, well, if I do this, what am I supposed to do? Ask the teams. If I need to hire a new VP, I'm supposed to ask the teams who? No, I don't think that would be very responsible. But you could start by building up from teams by asking them what was the impact on the teams that the former person had. What did they like about the person? What did they dislike? What could they use more of in a position like that, right? Build up from teams to help us with the information, to create the information that we need to hire more effectively. We've got 4 principles, so we're halfway. The third is people over skills. And I think this is so important. In the Annie story, the company focused first to ensure that the person had the type of values and characteristics that they wanted in the role. And they wanted to ensure that the person felt that they were in alignment with the company values as well and what their mission was and their purpose. And it wasn't until we knew that we had that right person in that right environment that then we started getting into the skills. Right? Because maybe it's true. Maybe these days, a lot of the skills that we have, right, maybe they are just a commodity item. Yeah, I don't think that if you're looking for a senior architect in a really complex, software system, that you can just hire somebody that, just got out of a 2-day boot camp for coding, right? But once we generally have a feel that the person has the experience and knowledge, I really think that the commodity item is the skill and their ability to work with people and create relationships and speak empathetically and understand other people's point of view and then, bring people into the conversation. I think that that's really where the true skills are, right? So people over skills. Focus on who the people are first and make sure that they're the good fit and that the company is right for them before you start auditing on what they do and how they do things. And then lastly, number 4 is mentor for the future. I'll leave you with this saying, and I think this is my favorite saying with this principle. What if your recruiting process was what if your hiring process was your greatest recruiting tool? What if the way you hired, just people gravitated towards it because they wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to go through it and be with you, right? What if your hiring process was so strong at bringing people in and improving the people that, imagine this, right? If you're hiring for one position and you interview 10 people and you're only selecting one of them, what if those other 9 people have a poor experience? What if they don't feel they were fairly assessed? What if they don't feel like they built a good relationship with you? You've just potentially eliminated 9 people that you'll ever be able to hire again. Right? What kind of impact does that have long-term, right? You ever heard companies lament the shortage of talent? I don't know if there's really a shortage of talent. I think there's a shortage of companies that know how to identify and develop talent, right? But give people feedback. Build a relationship with them. Don't just, so you're not going to hire them, then you just send them an automatic rejection letter and sorry, bye. Oh, mentor them. Help them understand how to improve and create a relationship, right? Because the point of these principles for hiring isn't so much that we have that there's certain practices, things that you must do. These principles can inform anything. Like here's ideas, right? Here's ideas for you to try, things that I've done. I've tried instead of screening people over the call, I've brought people together with their agreement, making sure that they know that we're going to do these things up front. We bring people in with a lean coffee. And we have them talk about what's important to them and we see the way that they interact and converse. That was our screening. We used events and meetups before we used resumes and recruiters. We went out to conferences, we went out to local meetups and built relationships with people and told them about jobs, and we found amazing candidates that way. We had pre-application conference calls where people could call and ask questions so that their needs could be met. We could say, yeah, this is what the job is going to be. This is how, we could just help them understand all that information up front to determine if it was something that they wanted to pursue. And of course, after we work with legal and ensure that they're comfortable with the type of feedback that we can give, but we have a process to be able to give actionable feedback to people, right? So that they don't feel in the dark and they feel like they can continue to grow and improve with us, even those that we hire. So instead of just asking, can the person do the job? Omar Molad is a founder of a company called Vervo. He says, first we'll ask how the person contributes. Before we open up this a dialogue on these principles and explore it a little bit, I want to share with you, this is where you buckle your seatbelt. This is a picture of everything that I've discussed put into one. It comes from a company called Hunter. In their software development group, you may be familiar with Hunter. It was where mob programming was conceptualized and where it grew. Here's Hunter and their software development hiring process. First, they make everything voluntary. So when they're hiring somebody, they say, cool, we're going to be hiring somebody. Do you want to participate? You don't have to, right? Have you ever just been sent an invite that says, hey, you're hiring somebody, or here, we're inviting you to this interview. It's at noon tomorrow. Here's the candidate, right? So everything is voluntary, ensuring that people who are participating want to and they have the energy. But then when they're looking to hire a new developer in their team, first, every applicant gets an interview facilitator. And that person is challenged and asked to adopt the mindset that they want that person to get hired. So they're going to go out of their way to try and make sure the person is comfortable, attend to their needs, figure out what they need, right? And just help them. Sit down and get them calm, anything that they need, right? The person is looking or thinking, I really want to help this person get hired. Then the interview process focuses on behavioral fluency. And what that means is from a developer perspective, the person never writes any code. So they mob together, and the person interviewing describes what it is that they think that they should do, but then the other people will write the code. What this means is that they've hired people. So they're a .NET shop, and they're working in C# and F#. But when they were hiring a Java engineer that had never written any of this, had never written anything in .NET, that person was still able to interview because they were comfortable saying, hey, you know what, if they are a great programmer and they know their behavioral fluency, if the ways of interacting and collaborating on creating code, if they can do it well, they can learn how to write, the language, the syntax, right? So they focus on less their individual skills and more the behavioral fluency. They give the candidate study materials in advance so that they know how to prepare. When was the last time you were at work and you were given a surprise? Hey, there was a meeting coming up and surprise, we're going to put you on the spot. Hope you can answer it, right? You know what you're in for. You have the ability to prepare. You can study, you can connect with people. So they give people the topics that they're going to be working on and let people prepare. And at the end of the session, there's a retrospective with the entire group. This is when they talk about how fairly assessed did you feel? How did this process go? What would you like more of? What was good? What was bad? But there's an entire retrospective for the person to improve and the interviewers to improve for the next candidate. Every applicant, every candidate gets a customized feedback report. This is where your strengths were. This is what we struggled with. This was the opportunities. This is what what we noted. Here's how we'd like to connect with you more. And anybody who's rejected doesn't get a rejection email. They'll get a phone call. They'll get a customized letter from their director. They're going to get something that's more personal, typically with an invitation to bring somebody in. The result, an invitation to retain a relationship and apply again in the future. The result of this process is, and I can share, there was one candidate that they hired who had been rejected 6 times. When was the last time you were rejected by a company and you applied 5 more times after that because you really wanted to work there? Right? But eventually the person got to the point where their skills had grown and they worked on the things and they used the feedback, and they're now a very valuable member of the team. That is super cool, right? So the idea of these principles are to create these Annie stories, right? I feel like these 4 principles create stories like Annie that we could start to share across the world, and it's already starting. At Scrum Alliance, when they shifted their executive group, when Howard Sublett and Melissa Boggs joined, Melissa took it as a big initiative, and we worked together a bit on just discussing some of the things that I've shared here. And she brought a shift into the hiring process at Scrum Alliance. So they've created these hiring events with things that they call guests, not candidates, not applicants, but they're guests, that really uses all 4 of these principles. And she shared with me some feedback from some of her management crew that as they've started to transform the organization, starting with their hiring, it's having really positive results. Management saying, yeah, I was really skeptical. This idea of changing the way that we do, getting out of the convention and hiring felt uncomfortable. But as an organization, we're significantly more confident in our hiring decisions now. And it's having a huge, huge effect. So normally, in the conference, we'd keep going and talk, but since we've kind of concluded this idea of these are 4 simple principles to shift and break this convention of hiring, I want to ask you, what do you think about this? What sort of impact does this have on you? What stands out? What surprises you? What are you thinking now?
Someone posted it, and I thought too, I'd love to get a retro on my interview process. So, go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say I had Very interesting. I had put in the chat that a lot of applicants feel like their application goes into a black hole. Unless you're hired, you never hear back from anybody. It's twice that if you're working with a recruiter. So to your question, I liked it a lot. Do you think, Zach, is this, in your observation, in its infancy, or how much far along have companies gone to adopting this? Are they resistant? What's your take on that?
So in my experience, my perspective is a little skewed because a couple of years back when I started making this, a topic that I really wanted to pursue, I started doing a lot of research and calling and looking for interviews and trying to get, interviews of companies, trying to find, what information I can find about the way that they hire. So since I would tend to gravitate towards the ones that are doing things a little differently by referral, I have this perception that there's momentum in changing and that there is a lot of exciting, practices out there and new ways of looking at organizations and bringing people in. But in reality, I'm not so sure if it's really that far progressed. I do think that there's still a lot of infancy here going on. I know from, I mentored a couple people last year into getting new work, right, and changing their job. And the interview experiences I heard from the people were just so disappointing. Like in one case, somebody, woman I was hiring, or I was mentoring, she showed up at her interview and nobody was there. And they had meetings and such, and so she left work, got dressed up, got prepared, really studied, and they just forgot to tell her that they needed to reschedule. And I just think to myself, I don't see how that's possible if we're really taking a human-centric approach and we're really taking this seriously. I also hear companies say things like, well, this is great, Zach, but I've got to hire 60 people for this big growth. How am I supposed to do all this with 60 people? Yeah, how? I don't think you can, right? Because we're treating growth this way. We're treating the way that, again, we grow and we build out our organization less from the relationship standpoint, less from the people-centric and human-centric, and we're just thinking about it as a big machine. Right. So I wish it were further. I think there are companies out there, and I've highlighted a couple, but there's a lot of work still to do.
Or at least you're highlighting an approach. That's good.
And that's really the strategy that I want to take. I think if I go out and prescribe and say, this is your new hiring approach, do these things, I think it'll get subverted, because that's kind of been the precedent out there, right? People look at things as a silver bullet and they don't consider their context. I want to give folks principles and think about, in your context, how can you use these principles to experiment? You don't have to use all of them. What if you tried just one? Start with one principle, and what change could you make that would be informed by that principle that you could learn and experiment with, right, to see what sort of impact it has.
Like, I get your point. I'm Ulrike from Germany, and I worked 20 years in the software industry. And what I see around, not just only in Europe, I see it as well, because I worked always for American companies, so it's coming from the US somehow. Yep. What I see more and more often is that the companies just look on automation, so how they can process applications in a more effective, let's say, in a more efficient way, not effective way, there we can discuss a lot, but in an efficient way. And using artificial intelligence to pick up words, to do interviews by a robot, to have chat rooms for the applicants, to chat with robots, just to release the HR people to more qualified work, whatever the qualified work is. However, I mean, this means you need more standardization than what you explained in this way. So have you made this kind of experience as well? The companies out there in your job, what they usually tell you, we're using software for automation. Thank you, Zach. We are not interested, or how they see your approach?
Yeah, I see a lot of that. And I think that that's one of the defining characteristics of this thing I call the convention of hiring, is this idea of highly impersonal, resume-driven hiring. using things like keywords and applicant tracking softwares just to do filters on people. I think this is an awful way to understand if a person is a good fit for your company, right? I think it's a terrible way. I hear people say all the time, how am I supposed to go through so many resumes? How am I supposed to process all this information? You want me to just hand interview? Yeah, I do. I really do. I'm not saying that you should go out and get 200 interviews or 200 resumes and go through and screen each one. That's not what I'm saying. I'm thinking about taking an entirely different approach about your hiring and thinking, how can I engage either teams to help and support with, if I have multiple things that I have to hire, how can I engage more people instead of being so driven and centralized from a management perspective? How can I, let's try trusting people. Yeah. But also by using approaches like, I need to hire 3 new software engineers. We are a Java company. Are there local Java meetups? Oh, look, there's 3. There's 4 local Java user groups. I'm going to go to these next event and I'm going to talk with people there. And I'm going to say I'm hiring who would like to chat. And I'm going to use this like a human-centric approach to understand these are the people that I want to talk with, rather than saying that person has the experience I want, that person has the keywords I want in a resume. There's nothing about a resume that is a good indicator of a human being. My resume is terrible because I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to hire a company, or I don't want to work for a company and work with a company that would hire me purely based on that my resume looked appealing with the right type of keywords or experience. I want them to be interested in me and who I am as a person and my approach to problem solving, rather than we think this person fits the template of the applicant tracking software profile that we built in.
I think you can do it, let's say, in different kind of ways. What I see is with a lot of job descriptions which are posted on LinkedIn or whatever platform you use, it's just like copy paste. You can just copy paste it to any company. So there is nothing really in from the company, from the organization telling the candidates about the company on one hand. On the other hand, it's not specific enough that the candidate really sees, oh, this is really a critical skill or experience I really need to have, because this is something really key for the role, which I think is okay to say, hey, these 3 aspects are really critical. This is really key for what we need based on what we're doing. Fine, but then that people know as well, this is really key. So you limit the application. So this is a point. Either you are too general or too specific with all the different areas, and then the people just send around something, and then you get applicants which are not either fitting the key criteria, which are really important, and on the other hand, you get a lot of stuff with all and nothing, and this doesn't help. So then you have a lot of people and you don't know where to start. So you can start anywhere.
Yeah. In software, sometimes they say you have to go slower to go faster. And sometimes I wonder if that's very true, about the convention of hiring. We try to hurry up. We try to hurry up with it and get through as much data. And I was wondering if we have to slow down a bit to go faster in the long term.
Yeah.
I think on on the side where people are looking for work, they need to start well before they need the job, right? So using your social network, going out to these events, like you were saying, Zach, but also, blogging about what you do.
Right.
I know, Heidi found me through my social network for the last job that I had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true, Andrea. Yeah, making yourself visible. And again, it's this idea of creating that relationship, right? So it's a digital relationship, and it's, it's sort of an information sharing relationship. But when there's people following what you're doing and following along, and they're interested in what's happening, yeah, you're already building that relationship, and that means for people to connect with you, about the things you need and the work you need, rather than, relying on recruiters and contracts and things like that. I think you're absolutely right. So, once we get, once we get people in, right, and maybe we do find the right people, right, and that's wonderful, but then they have to leave their job. They have to leave what's familiar to them and open a new door into, your company in a new world, right? And that can be really scary for people. That can be really, really scary. So the question I ask is, if people might be afraid coming into your organization, how do you help them feel less scared? Because, you know, scary is scary. Right? And speaking of scary, when you look at the stats on and the data on how we actually bring people into our organizations, you find something pretty amazing. So maybe 1 trillion isn't so, you know, surprising. Again, on average, and especially, and this is data focusing on IT and the technical world, right? So on average, replacing an employee costs upwards of 20% of their annual salary. How much do you pay your developers? Think about if they leave, you're gonna have to pay about 20% of that just to replace them. That's pretty significant. You say, so we probably don't want to have a lot of turnover then, that's a big cost. But yet we find that 33% of people who leave an organization quit within the first 6 months of working there. That's a lot of people. And it can get even worse when 1 in 6 is actually within the first 3 months. 90 days? How is that possible, right? Well, I talked about the learning community that I host. I was listening or talking with a woman that was looking for a job, and then she found a new job, and that was exciting. And then literally like 2 months later, she's like, yeah, I'm looking for work again. I quit. What just happened? She said, well, when I came in, their onboarding was horrible. There was nowhere for me to sit. I literally had to sit on a chair in a hallway for like 6 hours during the day. And, you know, there was no onboarding. I felt totally disconnected. It made me feel the company was poorly managed. Literally within my first day, I thought I made a mistake. And I knew I wanted to leave on that first day. Wow, that's amazing. But it's not so amazing, because when we look at the companies that do have a structured onboarding, and when I say structured onboarding, I mean more than 3 months, right? Approximately, for companies that have that, people are approximately 60% more likely to be there after 3 years, because we care for them, bringing them in, and we make sure that they feel like they can be part of something, right? So if this data, you know, aren't enough, well, this is, I recognize this is a little old because we're talking about, this is, you know, the early 2000s. But this is the most recent data that I could find that gave this picture from this angle. And I suspect that if we looked at it today, it wouldn't be much different. But for companies that made Fortune's 100 best companies to work for, companies that, you know, included things like onboarding and having a, you know, strong, you know, human-centric culture, they vastly outperformed the S&P. So these human-friendly companies, these human-centric companies also perform better. So as a set of principles to think about when it comes to onboarding and bringing people into the organization, well, I think that people companies really are, of course, suited for humans. And humans is going to...
Zach, what do you really think about the best companies to work for, or a great place to work? Because my experience is it's more about, okay, you have to do something as an organization. You have to implement something. You have to show that you're caring about the people. But in most cases, my impression was it's just about the money, how much money you are willing to invest and implement what is needed to make the scoring for a specific kind of level deal done.
Oh, to make these lists, you're saying? Or yeah, so I've seen some more. I won't lie. I've seen some more where I remember consulting with one organization that was on a list of best place to work for, and they did spend a lot of time to ensure that the type of feedback and such help keep them on that list. At the same time, though, in order to do so, there were, you know, some different practices and such in place at the company that I felt was kind of a difference maker. But I do agree that it isn't necessarily honest. I think the point that I'm bringing attention is that whether all of the companies are being a little manipulative with their ability to stay on that list, or just some of them, the companies that do attend to their people in ways that I'd say are different than a typical organization show that they perform better. And there's a number of different, you know, studies and you know, researchers that, you know, argue the same thing based on what they find. So I use this as kind of a springboard to just say, look, if we're going to be talking about people companies from the perspective of bringing them into the organization, what sort of principles can we use to do so? So the acronym that I'll offer you is humans, right? Because people companies are suited for humans. So first letter, H for home. So what does this mean? If you're thinking about your onboarding program, the first point of home is to ensure that people are entering a friendly, familiar place, right? Because they may be scared. When you go home, it's your castle. It's safe, right? It's familiar. So home might be things like ensuring that people have a place to go when on their first day, that their working space, whether it be desks, offices, in a team room or team room, but they have space that is set up, configured, labeled, they know it's theirs, that cool, I'm welcomed, right? That their technology works. Their laptop is set up, their email is ready to go, that they don't have to spend time waiting to get their equipment, right? Because when you come home, your technology is there. It's there for you to use. And consider things like welcoming offerings, such as cards, or just having coffee, sitting down and creating a space to have coffee and breakfast with people, and you can let people chat. Please don't do things like parade them around the office, introducing them one by one to each person at their desk. That's super awkward. That doesn't feel like home. For some people, that might be fine. But I know for me, who's highly introverted, the last thing I want to do is come up to people and say, hi, I'm new to, and then have to do that 50 times. It feels terrible. Right? Think about ways that we can make them feel like home. I know one company that does some happy hour type of thing, right? And if the person is interested, if they feel social, they can push the happy hour cart around the office on their first day. And, because maybe they like to host, like at home, and they like to have people, now they're here, hey, have a beer, talk, and they have an easier way to connect and chat with people, right? So this principle of home. For update people, everybody, not just the candidates, but your teams and the people. Help them know what's going on and what to expect, right? So update people continuously, communicate with them constant. So when you hire somebody, you've ever been hired and your HR says, cool, here's all the stuff, then you never hear from them again until your first day, right? Send information about the company, ideas, just talk with them and chat with them, keep them in the loop. Make new hire schedules visible. Bob Woods is somebody who I learned a really cool thing from. He creates a Kanban board that has the whole hiring process out there. So you can see what positions that we're looking for and where, who's been hired, and there's profiles. There's a big visible wall. So the whole company sees what we're looking to hire, where the hiring process is, and who's been hired and who's coming. And use invitation for onboarding. Don't just tell people, hey, you need to be the buddy. You need to go, hey, I need you to introduce, Joe and Bob, right? Invite people to say, who's interested, who has the time, who's energized to do this sort of thing. M is memento, and this one's kind of unique, I think, right? Help people feel special and appreciated by giving them a token. Not a swag bag. Hey, that's fine. You have swag bags. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But the principle of memento is to connect people to something, or to give them something that connects them to the community or the thing that they've joined. So, for example, a token for the company's values and missions. Perhaps like a cool gadget that's useful for work that everybody has, right? Something that represents the company that everybody has. I think one of the coolest examples of memento as a principle is a company called 3Wire that I observed, where they created this coin, this really cool coin that had the company logo on it, and it had their missions, like their mission statement and their values. And it was their token. And every single person had it. And they would have it at their desk, and sometimes it would even be used as an indicator where at a meeting, if somebody was breaking some of the values, they would just put a token out on the table as an indicator saying, let's call to attention what's going on. But that memento was something that everybody had. So a new hire got it, and it was like, you're now part of this family. So it's more powerful than just, here's gifts and presents, because everyone likes that. The memento is a token of connection. A is pretty simple. It's adapt, right? I think that your onboarding program should be adapting such that every person who goes through it, it's better for the next person, right? So the system is continuously improving. Rather than we've developed a new onboarding program and here's the new rules, it's after every person that goes through, how can it improve? N for nurture. I mean, let people know that they've got something that they're supported. It can be scary to join a new organization. It can be scary to feel like you don't have any friends or relationships. So nurture them with somebody that can comfort and help them through it. Now, these are buddies who matter. It isn't, I've hired a developer, and so Bob, he's on your team, so can you be the buddy? And isn't that, go beyond that, right? Go beyond similar job roles and skills. Say, Bob is coming on to join the company. Sally, Mary, Tom, who's interested in being with this person for the week and helping them through it? Find the people who are engaged by it, right? Rather than just assigning, as you see this all the time. You see, Sarah being told, hey, you're going to have to be the buddy for Christine, who just joined. And Sarah has no time. She's up to her head and work. And so what happens is that Christine just kind of gets here, are you good? Is everything good? And then they're left alone, right? So things like bots, those aren't buddies, right? Go beyond similar just job roles and skills. Find the people who really want to do this. And then lastly, S, structure, right? After the first day and even the first week of onboarding, we're only just getting started. Remember, most people, there's a huge portion of people that leave after just 3 months. So your onboarding program should get you through at least the first 3 months. It doesn't mean we're talking every single day, but you should have an onboarding structure that you provide in advance to your candidates and everybody who's involved, so that they know how this is going to go. But people say this all the time. I don't have time for this, Zach. I don't have time for all this stuff. I can't be doing all these things. It doesn't have to be complicated. Here's the most elegant, simple example of these 6 principles that I think I've ever seen. Now, it doesn't include all of them, but George Dinwiddie wrote an article, and I was talking with him a couple of years back about, it was this really cool thing. We had this team that had all these great ways of onboarding. And what we did is we put them in a Kanban board, right? We made it highly visible, the structure, right? And that we put the names of the people that could help with it, right? The buddies. And we allowed the people to, we sat down with the new team member to come on, and the new team member could work through it at their pace, kind of like home, kind of like feeling comfortable. I'm just getting myself familiar, right? It doesn't have to be complex. But if you do want it to be complex, and you do want the whole big picture, just like I gave you the example from Hunter, here's an example of Percolate. So Percolate there was an article that came out about Percolate's onboarding, and I got a chance to connect and talk with them and hear about what they do. And it blows my mind, right? It's got every principle that we just discussed all in one package. So when somebody new joins Percolate, within 48 hours, they get an onboarding kit. Now, yes, it's a kit that's cool. It's got some swag and stuff, but it also has things that connect them to the company and say, hey, you're now part of what, this package represents, you're now part of our tribe, right? So they get all this cool stuff with information, swag, things that they need at the workplace. And that when they come into the office, their work area is configured, working, and their calendar is populated with the whole onboarding structure already, so that they can see what's coming up, what meetings, they know it, their calendar is full. There's nothing worse than going into a new company, right? And it's like you have nothing to do, your calendar is empty. Your calendar is full, right? You've got things to do. You know how to start to contribute. They get a day 1 document from the founder, which is, again, written from the founder of the company that says, welcome, right? So it's this idea of bringing people in, this inclusion. Their token is professional headshots. How cool is that? People go, headshots? That's kind of weird. Why would they do? Everybody gets professional headshots because, well, now they can update their LinkedIn page, their profile, right? Everybody's got these professional headshots, right? So that they feel like they look good and they represent the company well, and they just, it's kind of nice to have. We create an employee gallery where new employees contribute their pictures and their information into a big wall that has the whole company, so you can see the whole history of people that have come through the company. They get a percolator buddy, again, who is somebody who is a real buddy that's there to help and support and to work with the person beyond just, yeah, we're on the same team, right? They're really dedicated to making sure that person has a great experience. And they wrap it all up by sitting down with the CEO. And it's this wonderful program, right? And that's just the first week. So when I was talking about these principles and discussing them with some friends, a good friend of mine by the name of Amitai, you might know Amitai Schleier, he said, wow, Zach, your principles are a lot like RK selection theory. So what's that? RK selection theory. He goes, yeah, it's like it's just this theory that explains, a species, right? So an R species multiplies and grows by just volume. It's like a fish. Swim stream, it lays 100,000s of eggs and only a few survive, but it's enough to keep the species going and growing. But a K species invests a lot of time on just a single person, kind of like a human. They don't just mass volume everything. They spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to bring up just that one person, but the end result is, superior compared to, what an R species is capable of. And I said, that's really interesting. So it's kind of like making this argument to shift the convention of hiring away and onboarding away from an R species and be more like a K species, a K company. And I think that these principles can shift us towards that by focusing more on the growth of people, maybe even going slower to go faster in the long term. Curious what you think. I think, hey, I used all of our time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, but these are our principles that cover everything from hiring to onboarding that I think, you know, really can speak to the evolution in the next generation of our companies.
Thank you so much for coming on Coaching Agile Journeys. Again, check out the website, and Zach will have you send the slides to us if you don't mind. So we'll post them both up there. Thanks everyone for joining. So happy that you were able to make it. Look for our next event on our website as well and sign up for that. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach. This has been great. Thanks, guys.
That was awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.